Cek. Is it on? Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, dan salam kebajikan. Good morning, distinguished guests, respected speakers, lecturers, students, and participants. Welcome to the International Stadium Lecture on Elementary Education, an agenda by the Undergraduate Study Program of Elementary Teacher Education, Master Study Program of Elementary Education, and Doctoral Study Program of Elementary Teacher with the theme STEAM for Sustainability. On these special occasions, we are truly honored to welcome our distinguished guests who are here. We have here Program Coordinator of Undergraduate Study Program of Elementary Teacher Education, Dr. Putri Rahmadianti, SPD, MPD, and then the Program Coordinator of Master Study Program of Elementary Education, Neni Mariana, PhD, and then the distinguished keynote speaker, Associate Professor Elizabeth Taylor, PhD from the University of Notre Dame, Australia, and all the lecturers, students, and invited participants who are here offline and online. Dear respected participants, today's theme is about STEAM for sustainability. Invite us to reflect on how science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics can be integrated to create sustainable solutions in education and in our global and connected society. Before we begin our events, allow me to outline today's agenda. The first will have Indonesia's national anthem, and then the next is prayer sessions. Next is opening remarks. The fourth agenda is keynote speech, and then next is plenary sessions. Then we'll continue with the discussion and question and answer, and last is a closing. So to begin our events, let us honor our nations by singing the Indonesian national anthems, Indonesian Raya. So I kindly invite all participants to stand in respect. And operator, please turn on the Indonesian Raya. Before we continue with the next agenda, let's proceed these meaningful events with a prayer, asking for blessings and guidance. The prayer will be led by Dr. M. Bambang Edi Siswanto, MPD, so we kindly invite him to lead the prayer.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us bow and head in prayer. Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, we gather today with gratitude in our heart for the opportunity to come together in this international stadium lecture on elementary education. We thank you for the gift of knowledge, collaboration, and innovation. May Allah bless this event, grant wisdom to every speaker, understanding to every participant. Allahumma nawwir qulubana bin nuri hidayatika kama nawaratal arda bin nuri syamsika wa qamarika abadan abadan birahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Amin amin ya rabbal alamin.
Thank you, Dr. Bambang. Next, we'll hear the opening remarks from Dr. Putri Rahmadianti, SPD MPD.
Baik, thank you very much Ibu Mareta de la Rosa. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone, and of course today the Honorable Associate Professor Prof. Elizabeth Taylor PhD from Notre Dame University, Australia, dan juga yang saya hormati Ibu Neni Mariana PhD selaku koordinator prodi dari Magister Pendidikan Dasar Universitas Negeri Surabaya. Yang saya hormati juga rekan-rekan sekalian, Bapak Ibu dosen dan juga partisipan dari mahasiswa S1, S2 dan S3. Alhamdulillah, puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala, berkat limpahan rahmat dan hidayahnya hari ini kita bisa bersama-sama dalam acara yang luar biasa ya, terkait dengan STEAM ya, terkait dengan STEAM dan sustainability. Yang pertama kami tentu mengucapkan terima kasih ya, thank you very much Prof. Lily. Welcome to our department. We hope you enjoy here. Jadi hari ini kami senang sekali ya kedatangan beliau ya, Prof. Lily dari Australia. Beliau merupakan mitra kami yang luar biasa selama ini, dari Bu Neni juga yang telah mengajak beliau untuk hadir di Universitas Negeri Surabaya. Khususnya hari ini kita nanti diskusi bersama ya teman-teman, baik itu di forum Zoom maupun secara offline ya. Hari ini nanti tentang STEAM yang mana kita Universitas Negeri Surabaya khususnya prodi Pendidikan Guru Sekolah Dasar, Magister Pendidikan Dasar dan juga doktoral Pendidikan Dasar, kita berkomitmen ya teman-teman untuk meningkatkan kesadaran berkelanjutan ya terkait dengan STEAM, SDGs dan lain sebagainya. Tentu itu menjadi program yang harus kita sepakati bersama dan kita implementasikan di dalam kehidupan sehari-hari, tidak terkecuali di dalam dunia pendidikan karena kita semua ada di dunia tersebut ya, kita harus concern di sana. Untuk hari ini saya rasa semua sudah siap untuk berdiskusi dengan Prof. Lily ya teman-teman sekalian. Insya Allah apa yang akan kita dapatkan hari ini akan menjadi bekal kita dalam mengembangkan dunia pendidikan dasar. Dari saya untuk mewakili Pak Dekan kiranya cukup itu untuk Bu Mareta dan Bu Neni. Intinya terima kasih untuk hari ini, semoga acara berjalan dengan lancar. Selamat pagi, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Ibu Putri, for the insightful welcome. Next, we'll hear the opening remarks from Dr. Mariana.
Okay, thank you very much Ibu Mareta de la Rosa PhD. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for coming for today's event, my beloved students and also my colleagues and Ibu Putri Rahmadianti MPD, Dr. Putri, sorry lupa. Sudah dokter baru ya Bu Putri. And then my beloved teacher, Associate Professor Dr. Lily Taylor. Alhamdulillah, today we gather here to get a very excellent knowledge about STEAM education because Lily is one of the lecturer in Notre Dame University. Previously, she was in Curtin University, Murdoch University, Edith Cowan University, and now in Notre Dame University, Australia, Western Australia. And she's consistently research in the field of STEAM education and science education for teacher educational program, right? And then also she was one of the most impactful researchers for me, especially for doing the dilemma story pedagogy in science education. So what we will hear from Lilith today in our Together event, joining for the Bachelor Study of Elementary Teacher Education, Master Study Program of Elementary Education, and Doctoral Study Program of Elementary Education together, because we have one course in our Elementary Teacher Education program, Lily, which is a STEAM education for elementary school. And also we also have integrative learning course in master program, including the STEAM, STEM, and STREAM education. And also we have a global perspective in elementary education for our doctoral students. So what will you present today, I believe will impact to their research. So, and also inspiring them to get a new insight about what is STEAM for sustainability is. So thank you very much. By by Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I will open this event. So hopefully it will give you like inspiring moments for you and for your study and for your research as well. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for the insightful welcome. Now it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Elizabeth or Lily Taylor, PhD. She's an associate professor at the School of Education's Faculty of Education, Philosophy and Theology at the University of Notre Dame, Australia in Fremantle. I hope I pronounced it right. Western Australia. Her background is in secondary science and humanities and social science education. So after completing her Master of Science Education's degree at the University of Salzburg, Austria, and working in secondary school, she migrated to Australia in 1998. And in 2004, she was awarded her PhD from the Science and Mathematics Education Center at Curtin University of Technology, Western Australia. In her research, she focuses on STEM educations for sustainable development, ethical dilemma story pedagogy, and educations against violence extremism. She prefers multi-paradigmatic research designs, critical auto-ethnography, ethnography, and interpretive phenomenology. She has also engaged in mixed methods and quantitative research, and her current publication in the last 5 years have been mostly about STEM educations for sustainability, project-based learning, and ethnoscience. She has been a principal chief investigator and co-investigator on several international research collaboration projects and has obtained international research funding, a BRIN grant in the last 5 years. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so she will share valuable insight on the theme STEAM for sustainability. So without further ado, please welcome, maybe you can give a big round of applause to her. Yeah.
Should I use this one or that one? Is this going to echo? Yes. Okay, just this one? Okay, brilliant. Okay, good morning everyone. Sorry, my Indonesian is very poor. I can say terima kasih, but that's about it. So I'll save that to the end. But I have had a lot of collaboration opportunities with colleagues from Indonesia, as was just mentioned. So Neni is one of my closest collaborators and friends over many years, and we really appreciate each other's work and support each other where we can. And another person I would like to mention at this point is Professor Yuli Ramawati from Universitas Negeri Jakarta. She has been another one of our collaborators, and we together have been working a lot in the area of STEAM, project-based learning, and ethical dilemma story pedagogy. Would that be
Recording in progress.
okay. So today I thought for the guest lecture, I'm going to change the title a little bit. And I'm going to call it Transformative STEAM Education for Sustainable Development, Challenges and Opportunities. And I changed it to transformative because I know that my dear colleague here, dear Nenny, is very strongly involved with transformative education, and you will definitely hear a lot about it in your studies. So I've tried to weave together. Okay, let's weave. No? Yeah, it's not working this way, so I have to do it this way. Okay, so the plan for today's talk is I will look at challenges for educators in the era of the Anthropocene. We'll talk about what this actually means, the Anthropocene, in case you haven't come across this term before. We will highlight how transformative education, STEAM education, and education for sustainable development go hand in hand and really fit together well. We will, towards the end, provide some visioning for the 21st century and what you as teachers and, preparing to be teachers, what the important and central role you play for the future of basically the whole planet. And I'm not exaggerating here, I do believe that teachers play an essential central role. So terms we are going to come across during my talk today that we will touch on that you may be familiar with or not include anomie, ethical dilemmas, ethical knowing, moral agency, moral disengagement, STEAM education, ethical dilemma story pedagogy, project-based learning, and divergent and convergent thinking. So we will touch on all of these terms in the course of the talk, provided you can hear me. Okay. So first, let's look at what education for sustainable development is trying to achieve. So the basic aims of education for sustainable development is planetary stewardship, which translates into taking care of the planet. So we're becoming stewards for the earth that can't speak for itself. Right? So we are its voice. We are voicing the Earth's concerns. Global citizenship, which is an awareness, developing an awareness that every action I take as an individual, however small it may be, has an influence on the whole planet. So thinking just in individual terms is not going to solve the problems that we are facing. We have to work together, all of us. And the third aim of education for sustainable development is the fostering of humane relationships. Now the focus is on not human, but humane. Now humane has a different meaning from human. Humane means relationships that take care of each other. Okay? So we show empathy for each other and support each other. So when we see poverty, for example, when we see human suffering because of issues that have to do with sustainable development, we actually show empathy, even though those problems may be far away from where we live. Okay? So that's the goals of education for sustainable development. And basically what it is trying to do, it's trying to develop the knowledge, skills, values, and worldviews that are necessary for people to act in ways that contribute to more sustainable patterns of living. And the focus here is on the word act. because there is a lot of theory out there. There is, many publications and many talks you can look up on YouTube or whatever that talk about what is wrong currently, with the planet. And, like we talk about climate change and everything. We all know the basics. We know the theory. But that just knowing that does not cause people to act in different ways. Okay, so this is what we are trying to work on. Get people, or our students, right, to act in different ways that are more sustainable. So the great Mahatma Gandhi said that the earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. So I think we can all relate to that, because particularly at the moment in the current climate, political climate I'm talking about, and global political climate, it appears that human greed and human focus on making money seems to trump the need to protect the earth. Okay, so a lot of environmental protections are being rescinded, are being given up. There are laws being rewritten to make environmental pollution easier. So for people who are engaged in sustainable development, a lot of these developments are very concerning. Okay? So he put it very lovely, right? The earth provides enough for us, but we mustn't use more than we actually need. And there are actually some apps, you may have come across those apps on your phones, where you can check, for example, these are the things I do every day. Like, for example, take my motorcycle, my scooter to uni. You probably know those apps, And then you go through it. I watch television for an hour. I use the washing machine and blah, blah, blah. So throughout the day. And then the app calculates how many earths you are using, right? You as a person. If everyone was consuming like you are, how many earths would you need to satisfy your needs? And this is really interesting. So if you can find those apps in Indonesian, please do, because they are really shocking. I did that with my students, because we all think we are being so environmentally aware, and yet when we look at the details, we find, actually, maybe I'm using a bit more than I should. Yeah. So what are the challenges then for primary educators in the Anthropocene era? And I'm going to come back to what Anthropocene means. We have a very fragile environment, and it becomes more fragile every minute. We have people who put like money value, monetary value above our fragile environment. And we have now, we know from research that we are at a tipping point in terms of climate change. So either we change our habits very soon and make changes, or the planet will get too hot for us to live on. Okay? Now, for many people, the mere idea that this is happening is very difficult to grasp. Okay? So for us as teachers, the idea then is, how can we show our students, how can we make it more accessible? How can we get them to understand difficult concepts like climate change? Because often we can't see climate change, right? We can see bushfires everywhere, wildfires. We can see the ocean rising, but it's all happening very slowly, isn't it? We can, for example, subjectively say that the area we live in has become hotter than it used to be. Yeah, like for example, I come from Austria. Austria is a mountainous country in Europe where, you know, if it gets hot in summer normally, throughout my childhood, if it got up to 35 degrees, that was hot, right? Hot, hot. These days, you know, my son is just there, they're having temperatures close to 40. And this has been happening over the past few years, and that's not normal, right? This is now going on for the past 5, 6, 7 years. There are fires in forests. We never had fires in forests because there was so much rain in the past. Not anymore, okay? So if we look closely, we can already see signs. But of course, there are still people who say, nah, got nothing to do with what humans are doing, yeah? So that's an issue. How do we get that across to our students, especially at primary age? So what is the Anthropocene then? The term Anthropocene is derived from Greek words. Anthropos, which means man or human, and the word sene. Sene means new in Greek. So it's the new human age, you could call it, right? It was the term was coined by Eugene Stormer, who was a biologist, and Paul Crutzen, who was a chemist, and they coined the term in the year 2000. So officially, it has not become a unit yet of geological time. However, what these researchers have found was that when they compared samples from around the world of soil samples, they could see evidence of increased human activity impacting the planet that traces back to the past 200 years. Okay, so clearly the era of industrialization has changed the whole planet. Right? We can see it everywhere, from the Arctic ice to the sands of the Sahara in Africa. We can see it everywhere. Right? This impact of the past 200 years. And on that basis, they created this term that describes this intense impact that humans have had in the past 200 years. Right? At no time before, you know, and the human history is now reasonably long, but at no time before have we had such an impact on the planet. So this comes from National Geographic. So as a teacher, being a teacher and teacher educator, so I started out wanting to be a teacher because I wanted to help make the world a better place, right? And help our students to play their part in it. And you probably had similar reasons when you think back to what made you choose teaching as a profession. So when you look at this image on the right, this is a glacier in my home country. This used to be the largest glacier in the country. And you can see the point there that marks where the glacier used to be in 1995. I saw it the first time in the 1970s when my parents took me there, and it was about 8 kilometers long. You can see where it was in 95, and you can see where it is now. I took that photo last year. And that is a lot of ice that was lost, that has just melted away. And what it actually means when we lose glaciers, it means we lose water. Okay? We lose fresh water. And that is very concerning. So this is just one example. So yes, we got climate change. We got threats to global security that we are currently confronted with. We got wars going on in different parts of the world. We see images of starving children every day in the news. And no one ever should have to see starving children in the news every day. Right? This is very concerning. We see global pandemics. Now, we've just all lived through one, but they are saying that the next global pandemic is just around the corner. Right? We are not behaving that way, are we? We just went back to normal, and as if it's not going to happen again. That's concerning. So, in general, we have a rise of individualism versus the common good. Now, the common good is actually a concept that is, there is a whole philosophy around the common good, which is everything you do and everything you think about is that do my actions contribute to the global good? Okay? Am I helping to make the world a better place, in other words, or am I damaging the world? Because the more individualism we have, the more we damage and restrict the rights and needs of other people. So a very important link that you might want to look up, the common good, right? There's a whole philosophy around it. So we've got unbridled consumerism versus sustainable development. Yeah, I noticed that when I turned on the television the other day, there is a lot of advertisements on your television, more than in Australia, and I never thought this is possible. But yes, you got a lot of advertisements. And so all of these advertisements want you to buy stuff, right? So just think about that for a way, and how does that gel with sustainable development? Nah, not so good. So what we have is we have a whole series of crises, global crises, that we are trying to deal with as teachers, because our students, they may be small, but they hear bits and pieces of the news, they hear adults talk about things. They don't understand everything, but they do get a feeling that things are a little bit stressful at the moment. And if in many countries, in Australia definitely, I don't know what it's like here, but many people find the cost of living has risen a lot, and they find it difficult to pay their bills, pay their rent, just pay for fuel, pay for everything. Yeah, same. No, it's everywhere, right? Yeah. So, and that would be passed down to the children, right? They know this. Even if they don't fully understand, they understand the feelings that are attached to it. So we could argue that we are now at the moment living in times of anomie. Now that term anomie was coined by the French philosopher Émile Durkheim. And he coined that term to mean a time where the word itself comes from the Greek again, mostly Greek words today, huh? A means without in Greek, and nomos means law. It appears that we live in a world where it's kind of lawless. It feels as if the old rules of living together and how to be with each other have been thrown out the window. And to many people, this state, this very fluent state where it seems like the old rules just don't apply, feels very uncomfortable personally. So worldwide we have seen a mental health crisis. We have seen a rise in anxiety and depression rates, and there's a very widespread sense of hopelessness around many countries. So I don't know about Indonesia, but definitely in Austria and in Australia, I know for sure. So many people find it difficult at the moment, you know, just to stay sane, because so many crazy things are happening, right? Yeah, I don't need to mention anyone in particular, right? We all know, yeah. So Albert Bandura, I'm pretty sure during your teacher training you may have come across him. He has been a very important social psychologist, and in his theories he came up with the concept of moral disengagement. So in his theory, what he actually says is, when self-regulation fails, allowing actions which would violate one's own standards of right and wrong, that's when we've got moral disengagement. Now, what does that mean in plain English? It means that in situations like that, in crisis situations, in situations where you feel you have no answer, you may suddenly do things that you would normally, or not do things, right, that you would normally not consider doing. Okay, so for example, normally, if your neighbor asked you to help them out, okay, with a bit of money, food, whatever, and because of your own pressures, right, you say, nah, I won't, right? This is where you basically, if you hold a moral value that says, I need to support my neighbors, and in that situation, because you yourself, your pressure is so great, you say, no. You're breaking your own moral values, okay? And this is what's called moral disengagement. It is often, you know, people where we would say, oh, they would never commit a crime, right? Because they're such good people. When people get under a lot of pressure, they might sometimes, yes, commit a crime. They may perhaps steal something from somewhere because they want to feed their families, right? Something they would normally never do, but because of the pressures, that's how they disengage morally, right? And they tell themselves, it's not that bad, right? So keep that in mind. So when we have climate change now and a lot of sustainability challenges everywhere, a lot of people decide too hard, right? I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to think about it. I've got a good friend whom I love dearly. She's in Austria, but she has developed the philosophy to protect herself from the current situation. She's not listening to any bad news. She's not, when anyone mentions anything bad vibes, she says, nah, don't want to know, okay? Good vibes only. You probably heard that, right? So basically what we have there is no action through moral disengagement, right? Because you cannot possibly look around the world and go, this has nothing to do with me, because, you know, normally your response might be, I need to do something. But because the situation is so overwhelming at the moment, people might go, too hard, right? I'm just gonna block everything out that is not positive and focus on that. So we could argue that no action in the face of complex crises, like for example climate change, is a conscious decision. Yeah? It's not, it's something we got control over. So what does that mean for us teachers? Think about that. What do we want to foster in our students, right? Do we want them to go down the path of moral disengagement, which would be easy, the I don't care attitude. However, challenges have always existed, and what we see there are arrowheads that are 30,000 years old that were found in Austria in the past 2 years. And these arrowheads, they were basically made by Stone Age hunters who had lived through the periods of the Ice Age. Okay, so when they were alive, there were mammoths roaming the landscape, and they were hunting for mammoths together, right? Very different from today. But they had huge challenges, right? They had huge sandstorms. They had to deal with extreme temperatures, and yet they managed, right? Because they kept evolving, like ourselves, right? They adapted, and they somehow adapted to the challenges by producing better and better arrowheads, right? As the solution to their challenges. So our consciousness, wisdom and knowledge need to evolve too and transform in light of this current crisis that our species depends upon. So you would say, that's easy to do, but how do we do it? So this grandfatherly gentleman up there, looks like a granddad, doesn't he? Lovely granddad. He is actually Jack Mezirow. And Jack Mezirow is the father of transformative education. And he said that transformative learning, in other words, changing or transforming our consciousness, always starts with a disorienting dilemma. In other words, a situation where we don't have a solution to straight away. That leads to a cognitive crisis. In other words, we need to think hard to find a solution. That leads to transformation. Okay? Now let that sink in. We always need a difficult situation that forces us to think outside the box to find a solution. So transformative learning, transformative education is really important for what we want to do. So Mezirow also says that we use critical self-reflection on our taken for granted assumptions, that's our beliefs and values, to transform ourselves. So beliefs that we have held up to now, that we find when we reflect on them, don't work anymore. And if you think about what I said before about anomie and the state we are currently in, we are finding that our old assumptions do not hold up, not all of them, right? So we need to think about, okay, so this is the situation now, this state of anomie that we're finding ourselves in. What do we need to change about our own beliefs and values to transform ourselves, to survive in this environment and as a species, similar to what our ancestors did 30,000 years ago? Okay? So the pedagogy underpinning transformative education is based on critical constructivism, right? So there's a lot of inquiry-based learning involved in that. Inquiry-based. We had a long conversation today about inquiry-based versus direct instruction and explicit instruction on the way here. As we do, you know, this is what we talk about in our spare time. So, basically, by examining our own assumptions, beliefs, and values, we can make a person more sensitive towards sustainable development. Yeah? And this is where you as teachers come in. What activities can you offer to the children to get them to think about what is a good value, what is a good belief to have, right? That is in line with sustainable development. Does that make sense? So, knowing what is good and right depends on our values. Now, all of the world's religions provide us with some guidance. The challenge is really for people who are a-religious, you know, who do not subscribe to a religion, for example. Where do they get their values from? Unless they get it from their parents, right? But that's often not the case, because what do the parents do? This must be an international phenomenon now. And what do the kids do? Yeah, fantastic. Great world we live in. So, yes, there are sources for values, but for students who don't have enough guidance through their backgrounds, family backgrounds, it's you as teachers they look to for guidance. Yeah? That's a really important role, and if you think about it, that's a lot of responsibility, yeah, you have as teachers. But you need to play it, because in times of anomie we cannot rely on the home and, you know, whatever backgrounds they have to do their job, okay? To tell students what is good and right. So values, you know, like would be things like trust, connection, integrity, justice, empathy, working together, loyalty, okay? All these really basic values that I think we can all around the world subscribe to without a question, right? So knowing our values helps us in ethical dilemma situations. An ethical dilemma situation is a situation where you are forced to make a decision that will have an impact on other people or animals or the environment, that has an impact on something or someone else. So it's usually a big decision. So we're not talking about a decision like, am I going to eat that piece of chocolate cake because I might actually put on a pound more? That's not an ethical decision, right? Not really. But should we have, you know, like unbridled consumerism in terms of food, where, you know, there are some people in our community that are starving? That is an ethical decision, right? Where you sort of think, oh, okay, so I'm sitting here, you know, with a full table, whereas other people in my community might not be well off, right? Something like that is an ethical decision. So this leads to ethical knowing. This is what's called, knowing your values is called ethical knowing. And that supports our ethical decision making. And as teachers, we want to get our students to a point where they can make good ethical decisions in the future. Now, why do I mention ethical decisions so much? Come on. Look. Oh, there we go. We've just entered the area of ethics, okay? And when we look at sustainability, in sustainability there are so many topics that have ethical implications. So many decisions we need to make in terms of sustainable development that have to do with ethical decision making. And that's why bringing ethics in is really important. Okay, so we need to move though. We are still at the level of knowing, right? Which is good. We need knowing. We need the theory, we need the philosophy behind it, we need the values, and we need to know our science and our mathematics and, you know, all those basics, but we haven't gotten to ethical action yet, which is actually doing something. So, ethical action requires moral agency. Now remember, we spoke about moral disengagement before. So as educators, we want our students to become active citizens. We want them to be able to negotiate all human interests by developing moral agency. This is a quote from Bandura. And what does he mean by that? Because ethical action depends on moral agency. So Bandura defined moral agency as it is going through the ongoing exercise of evaluative self-influence that moral conduct is motivated and regulated. In other words, we need to be aware of what we value and who we want to be as a good person in order to take on agency, okay? Because if I realize that in order for sustainable development to happen, things need to change, I cannot exempt myself. I need to say, I need to do something about it, okay? So your role as teachers would be to work with your students. That's your role, right? To help them develop the values and attitudes that will support sustainable development. That's your role. That's what you're doing, right? That's a very important task. That's your part of moral agency. But we want to instill that in the students as well. So how do we educate for moral agency? So moral agency is at the core of transformative STEAM education for sustainable development. It involves teaching strategies and curricula that promote the development of moral agency. And this book, I want to introduce this book to you, Transformative STEAM Education for Sustainable Development, that I co-edited with Professor Peter Charles Taylor from Murdoch University. And we wrote several chapters in there, and I'll come back later to a few chapters that are accessible through open access, so you can actually read the chapters. There are people here who actually contributed chapters to this book as well. And so, yeah, so you can share your chapter with your colleagues, yep. And so basically the whole book is about educating for moral agency and for transformative STEAM education for sustainable development. This is loud, isn't it? I'm trying to keep up. I know. You know, a bit of dancing. So in the book, there are many chapters of colleagues, researchers, who are actually writing about their own experiences either in the classroom as teachers or as teacher educators, right? And they all are about STEAM education for sustainable development. So maybe your library already has a copy of the book, and if not, they do? Yeah. So if the library already has the book, then please go and check it out, because there are many chapters in there you might find interesting, and they're really practical, right? They are very hands-on. So let's go back to what STEAM education actually is. So there's a lot of talk about STEM education. Now, STEM education for educators, and this is important, refers to integrated curricula, and I suppose that you have the same attitude here, right? In the case of STEM, we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics being co-taught together, right? Integrated. In Australia, the term has been, well, it's being used now in slightly different ways, where a lot of people refer to STEM disciplines. Like, for example, in the university sector, they talk about the STEM disciplines need more financial support, for example. But what they mean is just simply the science disciplines, the technology disciplines, the engineering disciplines, and mathematics, but not together, not integrated, right? They're just talking about the disciplines separately. But as educators, we know we are talking integrated curriculum. And I put up there the sort of symbolic representations of different levels of integration. Like, for example, you can have, if you've got monodisciplinary, I know it's ridiculous to call it integration, because that would mean that you only teach science, only teach technology. Then we move on to multidisciplinary, which is where you've got a common theme, but then you approach it from different angles of learning different disciplines. Then we've got interdisciplinary, where there is a clear overlap between the disciplines you choose, and transdisciplinary means that you draw on all the learning areas that you've got available to teach a particular topic. Okay, so there are levels of integration, and depending on your context and depending on the purpose of your STEM or STEAM teaching, you will use a different type of integration. So with STEM, what does STEM give you, the classic STEM? It gives you the what, it gives you the content, right? There's no doubt about it. STEM gives you content. It gives you the how, it gives you the skills, it gives you the engineering, the design thinking, that's all the how. But what's missing? We argue, and that includes Ibu Neni here next to me, yeah, I keep involving her, is the arts. And when we talk about the arts, we actually, come on, oh, there we go. We don't necessarily mean the arts in terms of visual arts, because a lot of people think arts, visual, right? No, we actually mean the arts as in the liberal arts. And when we talk about the liberal arts, that actually means that we include humanities, social sciences, and the natural sciences. Different thing altogether, right? So when we talk about STEAM, transformative STEAM education, we're referring to this, yeah? And as you can see, because we're including social sciences and humanities, it is perfectly fine to bring in discussions about values and ethics, right? That's perfectly covered. And so, what do the arts bring us? They bring us the why. If we only do STEM, we've got the what and the how. If we bring in the arts, we got the why. Why are we doing it? What are our values driving the change, right? Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, cool. So in STEAM education then, we have integrated science curricula that provide links to students' real lives. And I know that my colleagues here in Indonesia have been doing wonderful work integrating ethnoscience and ethnomathematics with STEAM education. Okay, this is perfect for the real lives, because the more students can relate to a particular issue, because the more meaningful it is to them. And I've learned this morning that you all have to do deep learning now. So meaningful is very important, right? So we've got real lives, we've got local, right? Local, maybe your local environment, your village, your city, your province, your country, and then you can sort of spread out to the rest of the world, right? But depending on the age of the students, the smaller, the more local. Huh? So yes, there are scientific contents. We are not saying we do not cover those. They're important. But there is a focus on the formation of the whole human being. And through bringing ethics in, bringing values education in, we do that, right? We look at the whole person, not just a little machine that can repeat content, right? Because as we said, you know, just knowing things does not mean people will act on it. If we want people to act on it, they need to change their attitudes. So we use holistic pedagogical strategies that are very often based on inquiry-based learning, like ethical dilemma story pedagogy, values clarification, project-based learning, and I know you've come across many of them before and probably will more so in the future. So these are the chapters, these are the links to the chapters that are currently available open access. So please do go and check them out, but if your library already has the book, do check out the original book, because as I said, there are many practical examples in there of what teachers have done, you know, in terms of transformative STEAM education. So I just want to run you, okay, let me go back here. So chapter 4 down there is a chapter I wrote about a particular project that I played through with my own students, my own teacher education students. And we worked around a STEAM project theme of sustainable oceans, right? And we basically created a sequence of lessons that was suitable for about 8 weeks, 8 sessions. So we started off with an activity that is very commonly done in Australian primary schools, which is called What Sinks, What Floats. So you basically just use objects and materials and check, you know, which ones sink, which ones float, and you look at buoyancy basically and the laws of buoyancy. Very simple stuff. We normally do that in year 2, okay, but it can be done again with a bit more scientific content in year 4. So after we've learned what sinks, what floats, we got students, my students, that was my teacher education students, were tasked with building a raft. So they were giving different materials and they were tasked with build a raft that not only can float, but that can also withstand severe storms and rainfall. And so you test all that. So the rainfall is checked, for example, with a big watering can. Does that sink the raft? Or for example, you know, you test the raft in a wash basin, and then you make big waves. Does that sink the raft? That's the big storm. So, you know, you do everything you would do with primary students, right? So then, because they were teacher education students, so we wouldn't do that with school students, but we then got out the curriculum and looked at, okay, so building a raft, which parts of the curriculum did we cover? What did we touch on in the curriculum? Where can we go tick, 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 tick? And we looked at all the learning areas, okay? And we found that we basically covered pretty much all of them. Right? So if you really look, you can find lots of links. So that was one session. And then, because in Australia, and probably Indonesia too, there is a huge focus on oil exploration and gas exploration. Now, in order to understand how an oil platform, a floating oil platform works, you first need to understand how a raft works, right? Because it needs to float. So then we turn our raft into a floating oil platform. That's not that easy, because suddenly the task is, yes, it's a raft, it has to float, it has to be flexible, but it also has to be anchored firmly to the ground so that it doesn't float away, right? Because we want it to stay in a particular spot. Now then we talk a little bit about the importance of oil exploration and what that does to the economy, and you know, very important, we all need energy. But of course, oil exploration does not come without problems. So there is the danger of every time you have an oil rig somewhere, there could be an oil spill. So there is a really good movie, it's a Hollywood movie. Normally I don't recommend Hollywood movies, but this one is actually based on a real story, and it's called Deepwater Horizon. And you can just use the trailer of this particular movie, and we used that as our ethical dilemma story. Because what happened is there was the Deepwater Horizon oil platform was situated in what used to be called, and I will still call it that, the Gulf of Mexico. And in the Gulf of Mexico, this Deepwater Horizon oil platform was operating for many years. When it suddenly had a huge failure, right, in the security valve system, and the oil just spilled out, and there was a huge explosion. And most people on the rig actually died. There were very few survivors, and the oil basically polluted the whole area of southern US and into Mexico, and has had huge implications. Even now there are signs, you know, of the environmental impact. So there are photos online that you can see of birds affected by the oil spill. It's really quite moving, right? And as the trailer tells us, the company that built Deepwater Horizon, and you can imagine it's very expensive building an oil platform, but they were too stingy. They wanted to save money on a particular bolt that would have strengthened the security valve, right? So they thought that would have cost, I can't remember, $50,000 or something. So they didn't want to spend that. So when Deepwater Horizon failed, the security valve failed, it was because someone had made the decision not to put in this additional security feature that would have cost them $50,000. For an oil company, that's nothing. And they had to pay millions, billions in repairs, you know, to all the people damaged, the countries damaged. So that was huge. So that's the ethical dilemma in there. Was it worth it, saving $50,000, if then you had this massive environmental spill? So we had an ethical dilemma discussion, right, as we do in ethical dilemma story pedagogy. Good discussions. Which then led to the activity of building an oil spill barrier. Right? That's also a great activity that you can do with your students in class. Works really well. So what else could we look at as a part of that sequence of sustainable oceans? We can look at how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, in your case, indigenous local cultures, relate to the sea and relate to the environment, right? Very different from, you know, like how, you know, the so-called developed nations are approaching it. We could also look at ocean acidification and coral bleaching, right? Which is where the ocean through climate change is becoming more and more acidic, and corals respond to that by basically expelling the little algae that live inside them that give them the color, and that's how they end up being white and dying, right, over time. So this was a sequence, as you can see, over several weeks that could be taken into a classroom and taught over 8 weeks or something like that. Yeah? So you can see from what I just showed you that STEAM education is really also education for thinking differently. When we think in terms of STEM normally, or, you know, the individual disciplines, what we normally focus on in education is convergent thinking, especially in mathematics, right? We need one solution. Like, you don't normally like several solutions to a problem, do you? No, you work on it. But normally, you know, there is one right answer. However, in the current situation that we're finding ourselves in, you just think back to Anomie and, you know, the situation we're in.
we also need divergent thinking, which starts with the problem and creates many possible solutions. So really, 21st century design thinking requires both. We need divergent and convergent thinking for education for sustainable development. So in other words, when you work with your students, yes, you need to give them the one solution tasks, but you also need to give them tasks that challenge their thinking. Like, for example, building an oil barrier, right? There were, you know, like every group created a different design, a different solution from the same materials they all had, which is, you know, this is exactly what we want. We want many solutions that we can choose the best from. So now let me do that little bit of visioning that I promised for education for sustainable development for the 21st century, now that we come to the end of our presentation. We need creative solutions to challenges of the Anthropocene. Creative. Again, that's where the arts come in. That require divergent and convergent thinking for the complex problems that we currently experience. And we need teachers, and that's you, who can teach both and promote moral agency. So you've got a big job ahead of you. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you can take one thing or more away with you and think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
We did it.
Elizabeth. Yeah. Ibu Neni, do you want to add something? Okay. 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 We believe that the insight and knowledge shared in today's sessions will add to your knowledge, and I hope you all guys can use this opportunity to engage with our speaker. So now it's time for question and answer. Anyone wants to respond, comment, or relate these materials to your own teaching experience or learning experience? Okay, Sophia.
I hope I can hear you.
I will speak louder than the voice outside.
Thank you.
Okay. How I okay, I will start with the what you say before in the beginning. It's really hit me a lot about we are know about the climate change and all the environmental issues outside now happen globally, but we don't know how to act, how to act in the way of sustainability. It's really hit me a lot when I first hear you speak about that, and it's you know, and it's the same purpose with my research. My research in I'm in a doctoral student right now, and my research is about environmental awareness, and it's have a connection with sustainability, so it's hit me a lot, and when I make when I start to work on my dissertation, I have the same way to think like you, that how to make students have intention to act and to have awareness to sustainability. It's really hard to make students have intention to work in sustainability. So, and when you talk before about the transformative education and add STEM to sustainability and moral agency. Moral agency are really interesting about that. Can you give me a concrete example about moral agency, because all the crisis that you mentioned, it's really happened now
Yeah,
in my
they do.
area.
Yes.
And I think that moral agency is one of the best way to one of the best way to respond all the crisis. I will read your book on the future. But now, but now I need the concrete example from you about the moral agency.
I think I can give you one that's got more to do with adults, but I think you can still get the idea. Because when I was still living in Austria, I was actually talking to a colleague from Universitas Negeri Malang, right, just 2 days ago. And he was telling me about a project he's involved in about circular economy and, you know, basically reducing waste and, you know, what to do about general rubbish, and you don't want it in the environment, and, you know, they want to build incinerators and, you know, all that's okay up to a point, right? But I said to him, what about reducing waste, you know, to start off with, so that we have less waste that we even have to incinerate, right? And so then I told him the story of when I was still living in Austria, where in the 1990s we had it was interestingly enough a conservative government. And I can't actually remember what the reasons were, but they introduced basically from one day to the next a law by which everyone had to recycle, okay? And there were people going around and checking your bin, whether you had thrown anything into the rubbish bin that you were supposed to actually take to a recycling center. So you can imagine initially people were quite put out. I remember my mother, she was not happy at all, because she had put 2 milk cartons into the wrong bin, and she had a letter, you know, that was stuck to the bin that said, "Naughty you," and so she was not happy. But, you know, over the years, people have developed an understanding of why they're doing it. And now, basically, what you do there is for a week or so, you know, depending on how you can do it, you basically collect your recyclable rubbish at home, and you already pre-separate it, okay? So you've got your cardboard, you've got your paper, people already know what the categories are, right? That can be recycled. So you've got your metal cans and your, you know, your plastic bottles, and everything's like already separated. And then once a week you go to the recycling center and you drop your things there. And this is like, you know, fueling up your car now. It's like everyone's doing it, right? It's become a habit. And now it's actually not even legally required anymore, but people are just doing it. So the majority of people is now doing it because they've come to understand why they're doing it, right? And so this was a process that took a few years, yes, but it clearly required people learning about what categories of waste do we have, what can be recycled, what should not go in the bin because it can be recycled. And so, you know, this is what I told my colleague there. Yes, you could. Yes, you basically teach them, you know, what is recyclable, what should not go in the bin. And we need to start, I think, with young children, because, you know, it becomes a habit. And they then basically tell their parents, you shouldn't have thrown. You know, like how kids are often much more serious about things, right? So, yeah, so that is a classic example for me how it can work. You basically, now, you know, when you talk to people, they say, I just want to do my part for the environment, right? And that's something small I can do, but it has a huge impact. And yeah, so I hope that answers your question somehow. So we start, yeah, but you know, like with kids, it would work faster, right? And in Australia, for example, there are many schools that do, you know, like sorting of rubbish as a school activity, you know, which is actually, you know, they got like containers set up in the school that have, you know, different categories for recycling. And so they got that set up and they teach the kids how to use them. It won't work 100% all the time, but it is a start. Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you. And there is also questions from Zoom.
Chat books.
Uh-huh.
So Budina, do you want to talk directly with Lily? Budina in the Zoom? No? So there are questions in the Zoom, Lily.
Yeah.
So perhaps I can read it for you.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, Miss Nani, I'm still
Yeah,
teaching.
Budina.
Sorry, Miss Nani, I'm still teaching.
I can't hear you.
Budina? No? Okay. So there are two questions from Dina Islama, the master students.
Yeah.
One of our master students. She asked about the first one, how can we measure whether sustainability education leads to real behavior change in students? So is that measurable, Lily?
Is it
So,
measurable? Good.
Yeah, okay. So the
good
second
question.
one, the second one is should schools be assessed on their environmental impact as part of educational quality standards?
That's an interesting one. Yeah. Well, the first one, measuring. Well, how do you measure real behavioral change in students if the behavioral change will most likely happen at home? I mean, what you can measure is self-reporting, which means, you know, you can ask students if they have changed their attitude and if they are doing things differently, but that is self-reporting, right? So, yeah, well, if that's what you want to do, you can have a questionnaire that gets students to self-report, you know, like, for example, yes, I have started separating rubbish. But with all self-reporting, there is always a bit of an issue with validity and with reliability because, you know, we do not know 100% if we self-report, if people report exactly what they're really doing or what they think you want to hear, right? If they know you as a teacher want them to do something, then they're more likely to say, yeah, I'm doing it, I'm great.
So do you think school need to be assessed?
That's a very good one. I hadn't thought about that, but in Australia we used to have, with the previous government, we used to have an incentive that was called the Australian Sustainable Schools Initiative. And there were schools that basically subscribed completely, you know, their whole curriculum and everything, how it was set up, and the teachers were chosen accordingly. And even, you know, in some of the newer schools, they were built completely according to sustainability standards. And, well, what happened is, like with many government incentives, I don't know what it's like here in Indonesia, but the money ran out. And those schools then became normal schools. Yeah. From what I do know, many of them continue their sustainability agenda. Should it be? It's an interesting question, really. Yeah, I think that encouragement is probably better than forcing. If you know what I mean. I don't know. That's a cultural issue, isn't it? Because I don't know what would work better here in Indonesia. So that's something that you have to decide. In Australia, I know for sure if someone tries to force someone to do something, people are much less likely to comply. Right? That's just Australian culture. I know in other cultures it would be, okay, so, you know, government wants us to do something, we'll do it.
That's why you must mostly do rewarding.
Yes, 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 yes. And encouragement, right? There's a lot of encouragement. Yes. So I don't know, encourage schools, definitely. If you think that mandating it would work, don't know.
Yeah.
You tell me.
Because here, like, we have like accreditation standards
Okay,
for all
yeah,
schools
yeah, yeah.
and also institution like
Yeah.
study program
Yeah.
here. So I think the Budina's question regarding that accreditation
Right, okay.
process,
Yeah,
perhaps
right.
we can add the sustainability standards for schools and also for the study programs.
yeah. I mean, if you do have that in place, then yeah, why
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
Okay.
So universities in Australia have voluntarily, you know, subscribed to sustainability standards to varying degrees, but they have. So yeah.
Yeah, we have another question from the chat box. Can you just put up, Pak Ali?
I want to.
Ditarik lagi ke atas, nggak kelihatan. Ketutupan apa namanya? Kamera. Ketutupan kamera, Pak Ali. Ditarik ke atas. Meeting chat Windows-nya, ya, oke. Yang dari Salma, 15. Yang dari 15. Nah,
I want to ask how we as a teacher can give good education but not classes. There are students with specific for their mindset. Okay, well, the most important thing is that whatever activity you choose needs to be age appropriate. Okay? It needs to be suitable for a particular age. Now, with young children, you obviously need to be careful that you don't present them with, you know, shocking pictures, shocking, you know, like details of problems. So you would probably choose a problem that exists, right? But that can be handled by a young mind, right? So with primary, middle to late primary students, we can do a little bit more challenging topics, yeah? And especially because many of these topics are all over the news now anyway. So they will probably hear them, see pictures anyway. So how can you do it? Yeah, you know, like as we were saying before, having discussions, giving students opportunities for reflection, where they can actually take time to really think about how they think about a certain issue, and then give an opportunity to talk about how they feel. Because this is actually something that giving them an opportunity to speak about how they feel and think about certain issues, that could actually be really good for their mental health. Right? So we're doing something good there that helps with hopelessness and depression. We know that young children have anxiety and depression too. So if they, for example, in class can see that other kids are having worries too, and they're not the only one, and so, you know, you can mutually support each other, that could be a good way to do so. I think often when we feel that we don't know what to do, what we tend to fall back to is teaching content, right? Because that's what we know. But that basically means leaving out that aspect that we spoke about, you know, of educating the whole person, and taking into account their values and beliefs and attitudes. So we need to do both. We need to give them the opportunity to reflect on an issue, but also, you know, well, basically, I don't know what it's like here, but when we start a class normally, we tend to ask our students, what do you already know? Yeah. And so in this case we could say, in addition to what you already know, which would be content, we could add, you know, what are your thoughts about such and such? Yeah? What, yeah. So, and then start a discussion. Yeah, you don't stop with content. Yeah. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much for the response and also the questions. Due to the limited times, we have to end our discussion sessions.
Yeah.
Oh, one more?
There's a question.
Which one?
Yeah.
This is from Bu Yunita.
Yeah.
So we have a student,
Yep.
teacher in Philippines.
Oh, yeah.
She's Indonesian as well.
Yeah. Right.
Bu Yunita.
So,
Let me call her. Bu Yunita. Mau langsung? Oh, camera off. Okay. Okay, Bu Yunita, we will respond to your question.
okay, how can we measure the impact of sustainable development? Yeah, everything needs to be measurable. Well, if it comes to content, that's easy, right? Because we know how to measure content. When it comes to attitudes, again, we are back in the area of self-reporting, which is something, yes, we can create questionnaires about, you know, how students think, what their attitudes are, but there are some reliability issues, as I've said before, with all self-reporting. So to be taken with caution. So yes, you can measure, but yeah.
So that's the impact of honesty.
Yeah,
Students.
honesty, yes. And integrity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody else from this room want to ask something?
Yeah.
Oh.
Ah. Great. You need to speak loudly.
Ini nih mikrofonnya Pak. Bunun.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Saida Olivia. I'm from Magister primary student. Primary student, bener ya? Okay, now I will ask. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm a little nervous. I want to ask. You mentioned that the STEM is there's a what,
Yeah.
how,
Yeah.
what is missing,
Yeah.
and the arts.
Yeah.
And you say that liberal arts is humanities, social science, and natural science. But
Natural, yeah.
why is only that? Why the? Sorry. Why there's that's only course? Why there's not any course that you can input in liberal arts?
Ah, that is a very good question that you should turn to people who design courses at universities. Okay? Because in America, for example, and some parts of Europe, they do have liberal arts courses. Okay? Here, I'm pretty sure what you have is you probably got humanities, you got social sciences, you got natural sciences, as do we in Australia. But they are usually like separate. Yeah? Whereas when we say liberal arts, you know, in what we want to talk about in the STEAM area, they are basically you're drawing on all of them. Right? You're bringing in the humanities, you're bringing in social sciences, and you're drawing on the natural sciences as well. Does that make sense? You're not convinced?
Because here in Indonesia
Yeah.
we have a lot of other disciplines really to teach.
Yeah.
For example, we also have physics education, civic education, and also local languages
I
to
see.
be,
Okay,
to
okay,
be
okay.
taught.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why the questions come because how can we like? Oh, yeah, sorry. How can we include all those other disciplines into
Yes.
this team?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so especially with civic education, for example, and like probably geography. Do you have geography?
Yeah, it's included in the social studies for
Okay,
elementary
social
education.
studies. That's what we in Australia would refer to as humanities. Okay.
Jadi semuanya
So-
yang lain tuh masuk ke humanities.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so it's just different terms for how the learning areas are organized. Yeah. So the natural sciences, they are easy because that's your physics, that's your chemistry, biology, and so on. The humanities basically cover social sciences and everything in it. So geography, history. We would, for example, also put religion under, humanities.
Humanities.
Yes. And therefore, values and ethics education falls clearly in the domain of social sciences, humanities, rather than the natural sciences. Okay?
Mathematics will be part
Yeah.
of natural
Yes,
sciences.
yes.
Itu kan di situ nggak ada matematika kan? Matematika
Yeah.
juga jadi bagian dari natural science.
Yeah.
Gitu maksudnya.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a really good question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you very much.
you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Chelsea. I'm in my second year here in UNESA, primary teaching education.
Yep.
So, you bring the topics of a few problems that actually a big problem in our country, in our world right now, like climate change and wars. Now, the topic of war is actually something that is not unfamiliar among our students, among the young children. Not only in Indonesia, but I believe in other countries as well. Here, children as young as kindergarteners or preschoolers acknowledge this topic very well, even better than the teachers sometimes. Unfortunately, it grew hatred inside their heart. They grow to hate certain countries, certain cultures, even religion.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some schools, even some teachers, support those hatred inside their hearts. And we as teachers, of course, have taught them tolerance and making peace, but it's different how they accept it and about the digital content that they consume every day on their phone. And that probably changed their mind when we at school teach them to make peace, to have high tolerance, but at home, they consume those digital contents that are different than what we have taught at school. Now, how can we as teachers change those mindset about that? And because I'm afraid that having those kind of mindset could improve the chance of having more war and unstoppable war in the future when they become adults and more children around the world become adults with those same mindsets. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's a really, really good question again. Thank you very much. Because what we are now talking about is the influence of social media. And especially, if you have an interest in a particular area, how these social media networks, they basically target you with special algorithms. meaning that you will get more of that information, right? So for example, if you've got a particular opinion and you look at a video, for example, that, you know, relates to that opinion, then you will notice that you get offered many more, you know, down that path. And that is a real problem, because it sort of creates echo chambers, which is you think that the whole world thinks like you, when in fact it might be a small group of people all sharing the same, you know, interests and the same videos and the same information. So basically what we are dealing with here is the power of social media and whether we want to give them that much power. So that could be something to start with as a teacher, to talk to kids about, you know, the influence that social media have on their lives and whether they should have that influence, you know, an ethical question. Because, you know, there is often a very simple way of changing, you know, like the small things. Like, for example, in YouTube, if you go on YouTube often, you can actually change your settings to do not keep the history, okay, the watch history. And what that basically does is, because if you leave a trail, if you leave a history, then that's what they target. Okay, that's why they keep sending you then the customized video suggestions. Whereas if you block your history, they find it much harder, right? Because basically, you know, like they can't really target you as well as if you allowed them to follow you. There are also little things you can do on Google. For example, you can go on Google Timeline and you can basically delete, unfortunately, also all interactions that you ever have with Google leaves an imprint in the timeline. And you might be very surprised when you go onto Google and look at your timeline one day and you find, oh, they know all that. Really? I looked at that 10 years ago? And the thing is, though, you can't just go and delete all, but you have to go in there and delete each entry individually. So you need a lot of time, but it's worth it. Okay? And then you can change all your settings, you know, to make it much more difficult to be tracked and targeted. So how do we do that with kids? I think we can teach them some of those skills. Because, you know, not only is it important to, I think, fight the power of the social media platforms that basically try to push certain opinions onto us, you know, which I think limits our choices as human beings. And with young children, as you were saying, what chance do we have? I think through modeling integrity and modeling good values, right? You are consistent with the messages you give, yeah? So they may get other messages at home or, you know, through social media, but you are consistent. You are like their rock, right? And, you know, like if they've got questions, you know, you may even get them to a point where they come to you and ask about your opinion or, you know, like what they should do or should think. Just stick to what you think is morally right and the right thing to say and do. So, yeah. I mean, you know, we will always have people who stir up tensions between different people, different religions, and we'll always have that, sadly. And social media is now just making matters worse, isn't it? Yeah. And you can use, you know, like ethical dilemma stories, for example, to work on some of those issues. You know, stories that you yourself can write. Ibu Neni can teach you how to. And yeah, and then use those stories, you know, to get those values across. Yeah, I hope that helps a little
Thank you
bit.
very much, ma'am.
Good question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Prof. Elizabeth, for inviting and engaging us in a critical reflections on these issues.
Thank you.
So, next agenda will have the sign moment. Yeah, how to. Okay. Meja atau di. And be ready for the documentation. Kalau foto dihitung ya, Mbak. Bu Nun. Bu Nun. Okay, and as a form of appreciation, we'll give a certificate. Please stay. We'll give you another appreciation, a certificate. Okay, ready for the documentations? 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone. As we come to the end of today's International Scientific Forums, let us take with us the inspirations and commitment especially to integrate STEM in building a sustainable future. On behalf of the committees, I would like to thank all the participants here offline and online, presenters, speakers, and also organizing team. And see you in the next scientific forum. Bye-bye. Oh, if you want to take photo together, photo session, yeah. Oke, semuanya minta tolong untuk ke belakang ya Bu ya. Ke belakang sini. Ke belakang sini, silahkan. Kita foto sama-sama.
Recording
Di
stopped.
Zoom juga Bu ya mungkin ya. Yang di Zoom siap-siap operator untuk screenshot juga. Kita foto sama-sama. Ayo bersama panitianya, ada Bu Enun, Pak Muja di sini sama Pak Bambang, Bu Delvi. Kita foto sama-sama.